would this inflation after a certain time offset the money that we get through this budget? This is the first question. Now, the second question I have is that in terms of the things that we can do, can we review the GST structure that can give more relief to commodities like things, I don't know, maybe rice, sugar, all these things, because we are hearing things are increasing, so that we can give more GST to those luxury goods and then give lesser to offset the burden in the lower income? These two questions I have. Thanks.
So on inflation, to simplify, there are two sources of inflation. One would be imported inflation. The other would be, caused by the domestic factors. Imported inflation will come through when oil price goes up, when the cost of food goes up, plus other imported machineries and the products that we need. So the way to handle this imported inflation is through a strong Singapore dollar. But a Singapore dollar just doesn't appreciate because you want it to be strong. You must have good economic growth. People want to hold and invest in the Singapore dollars. Then, of course, you would allow your dollar to strengthen because you're competitive in your exports. So the stronger Singapore dollar will help to mitigate the cost of imported inflation. Domestic inflation will be when there's a shortage. For example, if there's a shortage of workers, you find that there's wage pressure. Wage pressure leads to a higher cost because wage is a factor in the cost of production. Rental is another factor in causing inflation because if there's a short supply of office space, then rent will go up. So for the domestic side, the solution normally is to supply. You supply more workers. In our case, you bring in more foreign workers so that your domestic wage costs will not shoot up through the sky. And rental, you just build more office space and so on. So inflation, I think, is expected to be 4 to 5% in the first half of this year. For the whole year, it will be much lower than that. And then for inflation, you've got to look at the details of the inflation. The headline inflation is 4 to 5% for the first half of this year because it will comprise two elements which most of us are not involved in. One is the high price of COE. So when COE prices go up, because private car is a factor in your basket of expenditure, you find that your inflation rate goes up because of COE prices. But most of us will not be buying a car this particular year, so we're not affected by it. But headline numbers would include the rise in the COE and rental. Although we don't pay rental to ourselves, statistically in calculating inflation, you got to impute a rental. So when you rent out your HDB flats to a PR and you rent out to students from overseas, and the rental goes up, the statistician will have to impute the increase in rental into the home which you own. So the headline numbers also go up to 4 to 5% this year. So it's quite alarming, but we don't pay ourselves a rental. So if you strip the inflation figure of these two elements and focus on those which count for most of us, then you find that the inflation rate goes down to about 2 to 3%. That means it's about half of the number of 4 to 5. So that's more manageable. This is what they call the core inflation rate. But core has different meanings in different countries. In Singapore, we call it the MAS core inflation rate, because other countries also have similar elements, so they have other core inflation rates. So ours is MAS core inflation rate, which is about 2 to 3%. Well, how do we handle this? You can't just artificially try and sit down on inflation. It's not possible because the demand and supply, so the rate will go up. So what you do is to find ways to help you in coping with the cost of living. So this is where the growth dividends, utility save, S&C save, and so on, will help you. So as illustrated just now in the figures, for all families, you will be getting more than the actual cost, actual rise in the cost of living this year, much more than the actual rise. So you are not going to be worse off. But people forget, what's in my pocket is mine, but what is going up is not mine. Please give me more. So bear in mind, you are given something to help you cope with the inflation. And don't go out to splurge, because if you do, you may be in fact, putting pressure on inflation.